You're listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Here, we hold space for real conversations at the intersections of parenting, spirituality, and justice. With each episode, we bring together experts, everyday parents, and advocates to explore how we can raise the next generation with purpose, intention, and love. So whether you're tuning in from a quiet moment of rest or in the middle of the beautiful chaos of family life, take a deep breath and let's journey together. Hello, my name is Nettie. I'm a co-director for the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Welcome to another episode of Nurturing Parents. I am so glad to have Brittany Williams here with us today. Brittany is a fearless, powerful spiritual educator and writer who inspires others to live an empowered life and die a dignified death. She's the proud founder of the Ubuntu Wellness Space Foundation, which provides Black people and people in underserved communities of all ages with holistic death care and grief services that promote a liberated lifestyle rooted in joy and ancestral practices. Thank you, Brittany, so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nettie, for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. It's a beautiful opportunity to connect more and share with others our passion for supporting particularly children and underserved communities with healing resources.
Yeah.
And if you could share with us a little bit about the work that you are doing right now and how Ubuntu Wellness Space came to be.
Oh, that's such a loaded question, but I love getting this question. I'm currently a first grade teacher and a deaf doula. I have been in education for 10 years now. I've been an administrator. I went back in the classroom this year because of the state we're in politically. I feel that I would have more impact if I'm in front of kids on that classroom level because I didn't have that impact as an administrator. And I deeply believe that schools is such a place for social justice. Our school is where our most vulnerable population is, which is our students and our kids, a group of people that don't have a lot of rights. And so when we think about social justice and we think about that work, we always go back to our kids because they are our most vulnerable population, no matter what color they are. Now, I will say color does determine a lot of things, but at a baseline, kids are our most vulnerable population. So I went back in the classroom, but I'm also a deaf doula. I started the Ubuntu Wellness Space in 2020. It started off as a blog. I lost my dad in 2019, and 11 months before I lost my brother. Both were random. I knew I wanted to grieve, but I didn't know how to do that alone. I lost my mom when I was 12. And I knew from experience that I could not grieve the way I grieved that loss because it was not healthy. I wanted to do it right and in community with people. So I thought I would start a blog. But then as I started the blog, I'm like, oh, I love talking about grief. I love talking about the ways in which people die and how death is also connected to liberation and how you live impacts how you die. And so I started the Ubuntu Wellness Space with a focus on ensuring that particularly Black people of color and people who are in marginalized communities can have access to good care, whether that be counseling, whether that be a good educational system. Because if you give people that, when it's time to die, their deaths won't be so hard because they've had a lot of the resources. And so I started a wellness space with that in mind. It's been so many variations of it. At first it was a blog. I let it be a nonprofit for a while, and now I'm out of the nonprofit model. I'm still trying to determine what model fits the communities that I'm a part of and how I can do this work as intentional as possible. So now we are a foundation. We work with organizations, particularly in Brooklyn, in the New York area that support liberations, like a safe space mentor group, and then Get Some Joy in the Bronx. We partner with different organizations to get people talking about grief and death. Just last week, I hosted a grief circle for people who lost their parents. And ironically, it was on my dad's birthday. So I was like, oh, you up there doing something for me. So that felt sweet. It felt so sweet. So that's where we are. I'm in the classroom in the day, and at night I host grief circles.
Wow. Thank you for sharing the story behind why this passion emerged for you on the importance of knowing how to grieve well and the way you connected to resourcing underserved communities. when we are able to share the resources, make resources more accessible to help people live well, we are more able to die well and help ease that transition. And that's really important insight. And I'm so thankful you're doing this work because you've been through profound experiences of grief and you've walked alongside others. I'm curious, in what ways did your family offer you support with grief when you were a child?
I love that question. It actually brought tears to my eyes when I read it because my family, I think we have a very beautiful way. The people where I'm from South Florida, South Bay, Florida. And I love the way that we grieve. We do what's called a dead yard. When my mom was getting ready to pass, my family, we talk about grief through the way that we celebrate it. We don't have conversations around it. We just have parties and celebrations. Because when my mom was in hospice, I didn't even know what hospice was. I had been going to hospice for years, and I thought it just was a really fancy hospital. And I love hospice still to this day. It's one of the many organizations that made me want to get into death work. My mom was in hospice, but at this point, it was time. And my aunt comes and she goes just randomly, we got to get black dresses. And I'm like, oh, we going somewhere? Like, why are we getting black dresses? And she's like, Nita dying. And I think that moment for me, like, I was like, my mom? And even now I get teary-eyed, think about it, because I think now that I'm with kids, I think that's so traumatic. I love my family dearly, but that was the most traumatic way to tell a 12-year-old that their mom is dying, because it was so casual that I didn't have room to process. It was in front of everybody, and it didn't make me feel good in the moment. But my cousins felt that in my spirit, and after my aunt left, they had this whole party to cheer me up. I thought that was so beautiful to this day. When you die where I'm from, we have a dead yard. So if you die on Monday, up until your funeral on Saturday, we usually take about 1 to 2 weeks or even longer to bury people. And in between that time, as soon as the community found out someone has died, they start to come with dishes and come over to the person's home. And for a week straight, everyone goes to that person's home. You're sharing memories. We got our photo albums out. We're talking about the person. People are buying the kids of that person clothes, taking you dress shopping. And I just think that was, even at that age, I thought that was so sacred. I felt so special in that moment. I felt like people are noticing that this is a big deal that my mom died. And I think children need help understanding what big deals are. Because again, they're little people. They don't know. That's why kids look at their parents for reactions. They look at their parents to see, how do you react? So for me, that's my cat. I knew that it was a big reaction because I'm like, everyone is here, everyone is celebrating, so this must be a big deal. And that's why when I got to the funeral, on my funeral speech, I said that I wasn't really sad. And in that moment, my child mind was like, you're not sad because you've been partying all week. But then what ended up happening was, after the funeral is over, the dead yard is over, and people are gone, I was left with my feelings. And then I didn't know how to process, because my family is a very spiritual family. We're a family that practices a lot of ancestral practices. If my family see this podcast, they will probably say those are not ancestral practices, but they are ancestral practices. We are Southern Baptists, so we practice a lot of those things. And we just never talked about it really after that. It kind of just went silent. We scrambled to figure out where my sister and I could go. I remember one time my aunt mentioned that it was a grief camp. And even at my young age, I was like, oh, I want to go. I want to be around other people who had experienced this profound loss, because at the same time, my mom died in July and my dad randomly lost his eyesight in August. So I have two big losses. My family, we're from a town that doesn't have a lot of resources. Counseling was not a thing. I can't even name one counselor or therapist office in my area. They did the best they could, but now that I'm older, I wish things could have looked and felt differently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so interesting to reflect back on the week of feeling support from the community, support from loved ones, There was also remembrance of your mother's legacy. And
Yes.
all of those memories were really sacred and helped to ground you. And it's
Yes.
just really striking to hear you share how it was after the burial when all of the community stopped gathering around you. And then you reached a point where it felt like too much. You're like, well, now what do I do? Where do I
Mhm.
go? Who do I turn to? And as a young child, that is very heavy. That's
Yeah.
very intense. And I'm thinking about when you're so young and you don't know what to do with what you're feeling,
Mhm.
it kind of just stays trapped.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It stayed trapped, and I was, oh, my teachers. A reason I'm a teacher is because when I got back to school, I just wasn't doing well. I was running out of class. I was throwing things in class. And the thing is, my family have always told me I'm very smart. Even with me throwing things and doing that, I could still get good grades. It still didn't feel like I was acting out because my mom died. I still wasn't making that connection. I just was thinking I was acting out because that's my personality. But now looking back, I'm like, oh no, that changed your whole mindset. That hurt you so much. It's taking the Bible when I forget her name, but when she was raped and she left on her garment so that people can see what happened to her. I think when we grieve, we want people to see what happened to us. Like in Haiti, when you're grieving, you were Black until you're done grieving. You get to decide that. In American Western cultures, you don't know how to tell people you're grieving. We have no ritual around how to let people know I'm in pain and that I'm grieving. So for me, I started to let people know about acting out in school, which as an educator, it's the oldest trick in the, not even a trick. It's something that happens all the time.
Yes, yes. So for people who are parenting children or if you're teaching children, there's a lot of conversation that I hear on how our children's behavior is
Hmm.
trying to communicate an unmet need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a really big mental shift because for many of us adults today, when we were young and we acted out in, what would be called bad behavior, there wasn't often an adult who would say, "Hey, what are you feeling inside? Like, what is it that
Yes.
I can help you with?" It was more this immediate correction. Don't do that. Do what you're told. It just feels like when we have that deeper awareness of noticing what maybe is happening in the child, what's going on inside, there's so much more opportunity for true transformation
Yes.
and more opportunity to see who the child truly is.
We have to know that kids are humans that are living their own human experience. I think a lot of times we shy away from these things because we don't think kids can deal with it, but they are dealing with it. It actually happened to them. You can't take that away. Like, no one could have brought my mother back. It would have been helpful if I would have been able to talk to my family and determine tools to figure out, okay, how can we do this together? Like, I always remember that grief camp suggestion from my aunt. Even though I didn't go, I still think it was so special that she was looking up ways to support us. And at that time, internet wasn't a big thing. Where I'm from, we don't have computers. So I'm thinking, how did she even get that information? That is a level of care that kids need in that moment. They don't need hardness. They need routine. Their routine needs to stay the same, but they need the most softness in that moment and space for their feelings. They literally just need space. If you ask a kid a question and you sit back, they'll talk for days.
So practicing how to listen.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, listening takes practice and you can actually train yourself to be a better listener.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes when we're in conversation with our kids, we might think we're listening, but if we're always coming back with an answer and we're always coming right back with something we think, maybe that isn't really the best form of listening. What does it look like to pause more, hold more silence, to let them fill the silence, and to be more curious and learn more from them, what information they can keep offering?
And that's the beautiful part. In education, we call it letting kids productively struggle. If I was to ask a question in the classroom, I would just leave space. A part of me that loves my students so much, it feels uncomfortable to let them struggle because I know the answer. Let me just tell them the answer. But if I tell them the answer, they would never know how to become problem solvers and they would never know how to become critical thinkers. And the social climate and political climate that we're currently in, we need critical thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be raising kids who can productively struggle in the face of problems because they're going to have a lot of problems to figure out as they get older in this society.
Yeah, that's right. That's another shift that I've learned as a parent is how to teach my kids to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
From my upbringing, it wasn't encouraged to be someone who asks a lot of questions. It was just kind of listen and get the assignments done.
Especially as a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for young girls. With boys, sometimes we see it as them being curious. For girls, we call it sassy.
Mm.
And you say,
Yeah,
no, they just have questions.
that's right. We need to be really aware of those labels and be equitable with the different gender identities of our children and
Mhm.
not impose more patriarchal patterns,
Yeah.
right? That's super important. Thanks for lifting that up. As a parent, I have 4 young children, all under the ages of 10. In the last 2 years, we've had 2 losses in the family. My partner Isaiah's grandfather, and then my grandfather.
Mhm.
And so when that happened, it was our first time having to talk with our children about a family death. In the moment, I was trying to pay attention to what my children's age was and what they were ready for and how to talk about a transition like that in language that would make sense to them. This came up for me when Isaiah's grandfather passed away. My oldest at the time was maybe 7 or 8. They knew Grandpa Joseph. His name was Grandpa Joseph. They knew him because they interacted with him a few times when we would go visit. So when we shared with them that his time had come to transition, they were like, wait, he died? Like he's dead? And they're like, what does that mean? I remember telling my children, when Grandpa Joseph's body died, it meant that his body stopped working. And then remember what it felt like when we'd visit and we'd go to Trader Joe's? And they would say, yeah, he was so nice because he let us buy all the snacks. And I'm like, yeah, that feeling, that love, that lives forever. So we can always feel Grandpa's love inside of our hearts. That is always going to live forever. And that's what in the moment came up for me to talk to my children about when Grandpa Joseph passed away. And so, from your experience and the wisdom that you offer, what would you share with parents who do have young children? Are some ways we can help talk to them when someone passes away that we're close to? And maybe if it's the first time we are experiencing this with our kids, what
Yeah.
are some ways we can talk about that and maybe some advice you might have?
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry for your losses. I think you handled that so beautifully, I have to say. I love the connection with the ideal of our body dies and our body stop working so kids can see a physical thing. Like they know they have a body. And letting kids know that this body will stop working helps them conceptualize. I really like that you did that and then the feeling in their heart. So I'm going to say things, but it's probably going to be very close to this because I think that was beautifully done. And I wrote down some things. One of the first things is normalizing their feelings. Kids need to know that grief is wide. They may not be sad. They have their own feelings. They may have been happy, and we have to let kids grieve how they grieve. So if you tell a child something, I always get with parents, they're like, I told them that such and such died, and they just walked away. They walked away because they needed time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bet you they're going to come back maybe a couple of hours and start to ask questions. But we have to respect in that moment, the way they processed that was, I need time. And then also being honest and clear. I think it's very important, especially as we think about religion, that we don't make it a concept that kids can't understand. For example, telling kids that at one day we all gonna go to glory together. We're not all gonna die at the same time. And that confuses kids because they're like, wait, I thought we were all in this together. Being very honest and clear that everyone dies and we're all going to die just like everyone is born. And just like we don't know when people are going to die. And that's okay. You have nothing to fear. And I think the biggest thing is parents think kids will become scared. And they will, because anyone can tell you that there is some fear of death. All of us have a little fear of death because it's the unknown. And that's okay for them to be scared of things that are unknown. You have to normalize their feelings. Also, you have to keep the routines. For example, at my young age, I was still going to school when my mom died. Someone different may have been picking me up, but I was still keeping my schedule. I still needed to go to school. I still needed to get up in the morning because kids need routine to know that everything is okay. Routine for kids is very, very important because it lets them know that even on the outside, things may be going on, but at this moment, I have a routine and everything is okay. And also inviting kids to express their feelings, asking them, do you have any questions? How does that make you feel? The question you asked about on their heart and where Grandpa Joseph is in their heart. Those are great questions so that kids can start to ask. They may not have questions, and that's okay. But kids, I'm telling you, they'll probably have a question about it a year later because they process things very differently. Also, creating rituals of remembrance, like going to Trader Joe's every time and knowing that when you're there, that was Grandpa Joseph's favorite spot. So, doing little things like that for me and my family, it was important that we had that dead yard because to me, that's even as an adult, that really impacted my grief. So, creating some type of ritual. If I have a student who parent is passing, one thing I like to do with them is make cards. Last year we had a student experience the loss of their parent. We made them cards as a class. We shared things about them, and that was a ritual we did in school so that they can know that we noticed this big thing happen in your life, and we're going to pause our classroom so that we can acknowledge it. Because you can't keep the routine, but you have to acknowledge that was a big thing that happened in their lives. And again, seeking extra support when needed. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask someone to be there while you have the conversation. It's okay to go to your school counselor and ask, can we do a play conversation? I once had to tell a child their dad had passed because their grandmother didn't know how to tell them, and I did it while playing Barbie dolls with her. And I'm playing and I'm saying something big has happened. Do you mind if I share it with you at this moment? And we're brushing the doll's hair. And she said, yeah. And I'm telling her, Dad, he loves you so much. And I just want you to know that he has died and passed over. And I make sure that I say die. Because for kids, words like pass over and those things, it's hard for them to understand the concrete meaning. So you have to be really honest with kids and say, this person has died, so that they can understand that it's a finality to death, which I think that's, in my experience, that's the hardest thing for kids. I'll never forget my student. We were talking and I was asking her like, oh, what are you making this for? And she was like, it's for when I go see my mom at the hospital again. And I told her, your mom was in the hospital, but she died. So she's not there anymore. Because in her little mind, she thought that even though her mom died, she was still in the hospital. They just hadn't gone to see her in a long time. And that was before the funeral. So it wasn't final to her because no one had explained to her that death is final. Like you said, your body stops working.
Yeah, that's good advice to help us remember, especially with younger children, the importance of the words we choose. It can probably feel uncomfortable for some of us adults to say the word died to a young child.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of cultural reasons for that because culture at large has made it something that we shy away from or not talk about. To get comfortable with using the word that helps children understand this person has died. I'm thinking about the adult perspective. What does it mean for us to be prepared for those conversations with our kids? It really requires us to have done some of our own work to be able to hold space with compassion, with care, with trust. How are we able to hold sensitive moments and not shy away from that vulnerability? It's very vulnerable.
It's the
Right.
most vulnerable conversation you can have with a child. I've had it multiple times, and each time it's hard because I really don't want to be the person to bear this bad news to a child. We don't want to see them sad and we don't want to see them in pain. But the ideal of being a parent or someone that nurtures children is like not like protecting them, but also letting them experience that pain, being there to support them so that they do it in a healthy way. I will say the conversation is probably one of my least favorite parts of, not least favorite, it's one of the trickiest part of being a death doula, is I wish that kids didn't have to experience death. Like, the vain part of me wish it didn't have to happen. But now that I know they do, I spend a lot of time thinking, how can we, especially in America, especially in westernized places, make sure that kids are comfortable with death? Because also, kids that grow up and have a fear to death are also very anxious, because your fear to death is also your fear to the unknown, so you don't take risks. So then you raise a child that never take risks, and they never live the life that is abundant.
That's right. There's so many connections you can make with a conversation around death and how it's connected to who the child will develop into in their adulthood. That's super important to remember. Helping our children know that they're supported even when life feels so hard.
Yes.
And I'm learning with my young children, they are so resilient when they know, hey, mom's here and this is really sad what we're having to talk about, or this is really frustrating what we're having to talk about. It hurts. Together we can feel this and we can process it. I share with my kids that we trust, like deep down, we trust that we're never alone. Even when life feels so hard, we trust God is with us. And I'm thinking, there's mantras that we use to help us remember that we're not alone. There's one mantra that I have on the bathroom mirror in my kids' bathroom. And I got this card from a work event. And on the card, it says, I am not afraid, God is with me.
Oh.
What I love seeing is that I have a 2-year-old, even as young as 2 years old, because it's on the mirror, I see it every day when we brush his teeth. And I'll read it to him regularly. I'll say, I am not afraid. God is with me. And so he pretty much has it memorized, because when you repeat something so often in a child's brain, they memorize it.
And I get so passionate about the way we speak to our kids. The first week of school really did it for me. My body is adjusting to being back. But I think about language with kids a lot, and how, at least culturally for me, there have not been a lot of examples of language being used in a way sometimes to uplift our kids. And there has been moments where I felt very uplifted by my community, like all the time. But then I also worry that sometimes the way we speak to kids is rooted in a lot of white supremacy, and is rooted in a lot of fear, and is rooted in a lot of scarcity. So we say these things out of protection, but we don't want to raise kids that have a scarce mindset. We don't want to raise kids that don't think that they can do things. That's why having these conversations are important, because in that moment, you also get to build your child right back up. So although that conversation was hard, you get to pour into their bucket. So you're taking some water out of their bucket, and it's really hard, but you get to fill that bucket right back up. That's why if we learn the words we speak to kids, even the greetings in the morning, their little faces just brightens up. And I like the language and the words we say to kids is so important, because if you tell a kid they can be anything, they'll grow up and be anything. If you tell a kid you can grow up and rule the world, they'll grow up and rule the world. We have to make sure that, even in these conversations around death, even in these conversations around grief, kids know that you can do this. And I always, my students who lose their parents, I share that I lost my parent. I say that I have a mommy and daddy that isn't here with me either. It was hard. I tell them, when I was a child, it was very hard, and I was doing a lot of things that you do. One of my students asked, how did you do it? I said, one day I just wanted to feel better. And that literally was it. One day when I was in the 9th grade, I just wanted to feel better. So I unfortunately had to figure out how to feel better by myself. I didn't have people to have these conversations with, but I knew I wanted to feel better. The people started to come. So even for our students and our children who don't have this, it's like, as community members, even if they're not your kids, they're your kids. Mm-hmm. And that's another, how we think about the role of parenting. Parenting should not be isolating. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to be a parent. Hats off to you all. It's so much work. And I wish that we can realize that parents can't do it alone. They need strong community. So even as we talk about these conversations, who can you bring in your community to have that conversation? And we do pastors a lot to come in and have that conversation, a family friend. And that way kids can see that, oh, I'm having this conversation with my community. I'm having
Mhm.
this conversation with a group of people who's going to support me through this grief. Kids need to see that, like, I'm going to support you through this, and you have to tell them how. You can't just tell kids that. You actually have to tell them your plan.
Yes, you do. That's right. Don't assume that they're gonna have their own imaginations on what things could look like. So we
Yeah.
must let our kids know, what is it gonna look like together to get through this?
I like
And
that.
I'm thankful for your reminder that we really were designed to be in community with one another, to lift each other up. So the
Yeah.
nuclear parent life and expecting the nuclear home to raise the child is a myth. It's not sustainable. And whatever we can do to bring more community together, that is going to help change our society. That will help transform our children as they grow older. And so let's keep doing that. Let's keep leaning into the partnerships, the relationships that help
Mhm.
us collectively raise the next generation together.
I think the vision of this podcast, like, parents need things like this, and communities need things like this, especially our communities who are the most impacted by racism and systemic racism and violence. Our communities who are the most vulnerable need conversations like this, because a child with a playbook, God doesn't send down your child with all the things you have to do. Parents deserve grace. We're all trying to figure this out. I may not be a parent, but as an educator, sometimes my students, I'm like, I have no idea how to help you in this moment. I'm just going to throw some things out and hope that it sticks. But then it feels good if I have a teacher that walks by and is like, I got you, Miss Williams. I had this child last year. Here's how they like to be supported. And I'm like, oh, thanks.
That's right. So let's remember that it's good to lean in for help. It's good to reach out and do things together. To be self-sufficient is not true success. It's
Yeah.
not. That is a great reminder for all of us. Just to reflect back the ways that you offered us parenting children or caregiving children to normalize their feelings, reach out and find the support that you need. I'm trying to remember the other ones you had mentioned. Can you help
And
me remember?
yes, you can keep routines, making sure that kids keep their bedtime, keep those things as normal as possible. Also, ask questions, share your own feelings. You have
Mm.
to share with your kids that I'm sad. Even if you say it with tears in your eyes, kids have to see that it's okay for you to be sad as well. Your child needs to know that you are a human with feelings too, and this death made me sad as well. That shows them that when I'm sad, I cry. When I'm sad, I journal. When I'm sad, I need space. Making sure that you create some type of ritual of remembrance.
Mm.
Even though that person is no longer here with us on the earth side, what can we do as a family to remember them? What can we do to create legacy? You can do legacy projects with kids. You can do scrapbooking. Take them to the park and draw at the park that day. You can go on a remembrance walk, count the leaves, and think about the person that died and how many they would have counted. It's little things that doesn't cost money, but it's creating these memories that kids are going to need to be fulfilled adults. I think it's
Yeah.
important that kids are not just adults, but adults that feel fulfilled and adults that know that they can rule the world. My students, I know that they can rule the world. No one can tell me all of my students can't rule the world. Students need community like that, even when you're talking to them about death, even when you're talking to them about grief. They still need to know that this happened, but you can still rule the world.
Thank you for sharing that passion with us, Brittany. It's super important. It's beautiful, just to see the way that you are pouring love into our world that transforms oppression, transforms fear. And that's what we need in our time. We need these messages to remember who we truly are. I'm appreciating so much the wisdom you shared with us, and would love to hear from you. For our listeners, how can we stay connected with you and support the work that you are doing?
That's a great question. I'm on Instagram as Ubuntu Wellness Space. That's where I post a lot of updates. I'm going to be coming out with group grief sessions and some different online events so I can get more of a virtual community. Also, the Ubuntu Wellness Space, that's my platform where I offer services for families, schools, and individuals. I offer ancestral and spiritual services as well. as clinical services. I would love to stay in contact because I love this conversation and it's making me think about all the things I can do with grief and kids. So that's where you can find me. And please come to the Ubuntu Wellness site.
Yes, thanks for sharing that. I really hope that all of us listening can take a moment. I've already visited your Instagram and your website and hope to continue to partner together to bring more of this support to our communities. Yeah. It's so needed and it's healing work. And speaking of websites, we also have the Ubuntu Wellness space as a resource on our Radically Inclusive Parenting website, which is inclusiveparents.org. We have your website listed there as a resource for folks to easily find. And to share with our listeners, we are going to be sharing more details on our website about a parenting virtual summit coming up where we can dive deeper into more practices and insight from professionals and experts who care about seeing justice come to be through the way we raise our children.
And can I just say, Nettie, as you say that, I think it takes a very special person. I've told you this before. I think you're one of the people that I can see the calling that God has for you clearly because you live it out so well. And I think even this podcast and just what you're doing for families, and not just families, but families who are marginalized. And you're a parent yourself. So you're doing this as a parent, but you're doing it as a community member. And I just think this so special. And I think you're so called to this work. I'm so grateful that God had us work together because your calling is so big. The fruits are so good. You deserve all of the goodness because you don't have to do this and you do it. That's what it means to be a community member, when you do things that you don't have to do, but you want to support your community. So thank you. I thought this was a beautiful conversation. And I just love this. Thank you. This really made my Sunday.
Thank you, Brittany. Those words mean so much. I really resonate with what you said, that when we live from our deepest heart and we give of ourselves when we don't have to, that's what it means to be in community with each other. That's what it means to really live connected to each other for the sake of everyone's well-being. So we can thrive holistically and collectively. And so our spirits are connected.
They are.
There's no going back.
I'm happy about that. Thank you, Nettie.
Thank you, Brittany. This was a beautiful conversation, and I look forward to doing more work together.
Same. This was a beautiful conversation.
You've been listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. We hope today's conversation offered you a moment of connection, a spark of insight, or simply a reminder that you are not alone on your parenting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone in your village. Together, we're building a more inclusive future, one conversation and one child at a time. For more information about the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project, visit us at inclusiveparents.org or follow us on social media at radically.inclusive.parents.